Good afternoon. This is Goldie, also known as Mr. Anecdotal, Mr. Pasty, and the Talking Head. It's Sunday, February 19th, 2012. Remember, most importantly, I rant so you don't have to. My band is playing March 10th at the Crown and Harp at 8:30 in Dallas. I need someone to HD video it. Please be that someone. And if you want a transcript of this show, send me an email to goldierant@gmail.com. In late December 2011, Obama signed a defense appropriations bill which is called the NDAA, and it included a provision allowing for the indefinite detention of U.S. citizens suspected of terrorism. And when I say suspected of terrorism, I mean in its most expansive and amorphous way. The statute has words like dangerous and suspected and belligerent. I have to assume that I and quite a few of my friends fall into that category. We are accusing Obama, and accuse George W. Bush correctly, I might add, of being a part of the broken system ruled by those that have money. We're saying that there are structural defects in our system, under our Constitution, that need to be fixed, peacefully. The idea that Obama signed this thing is disgusting and infuriating. He is more of the same. Actually, he is worse than more of the same. That's what I like to call him right now. Worse than more of the same. And again, the reaction from Democrats is, since it's our guy doing it, it's okay. Well, guess what? If it's our guy doing it, then it's worse by a long shot. I wish I could state the issue as eloquently as Michael Ventura did in the Austin Chronicle. I have that link there. That's the one from February 10th. And when you read it, if it does not sicken you, I'm going to call you an idiot to your face. Additionally, he wrote, NDAA, Obama's betrayal on January 27, 2012, in the Austin Chronicle, which further delineates Obama's betrayal of the Constitution and subsequent signing statement, saying that he would never violate the Constitution. Well, by signing it, he has violated the Fourth Amendment's prohibition on unreasonable search and seizures and the obligation of detention with a warrant. Michael Ventura, at the end of his article, quotes the great American jurist William O. Douglas. As nightfall does not come at once, neither does oppression. In both instances, there is a twilight when everything remains seemingly unchanged. And it is in such a twilight that we all must be most aware of change in the air, however slight, lest we become unwitting victims of the darkness. Close quote. It's poetic, but it's also true. And me harping about it is an attempt to bring light to this twilight where this bullshit is occurring. Are you so confident that the Supreme Court might overrule this law that you're willing to leave it to a Supreme Court that came out with the pro-government eminent domain ruling in Kelo and the downfall of the Republic ruling in Citizens United? Don't think for a second, by the way, that the war drums that are beating against Iran do not get used for other agendas by those that can benefit. Increased surveillance, these indefinite detentions, increased drone flights in the U.S., increased data mining are all offshoots of Obama's worse than more of the same actions. From the Wall Street Journal, February 1st, 2012, Spy Chief sees Iran threats in U.S. by Siobhan Gorman. The subheadline was, Director of National Intelligence delivers annual summary of findings, and senators focused on perceived dangers from Tehran. Quotes, Iran's leaders have changed their calculus and now appear willing to conduct an attack within the U.S., Spy Chief James Clapper said. They're going to attack us in the U.S. That's what he told Congress. Really. Okay, in the Wall Street Journal from February 11th, 2012, Islamism sets stage for Maldives coup by Tom Wright. Again, Islamism set stage for Maldives coup by Tom Wright. This paradise for quotes, this paradise for wealthy tourists has shown a very different face in recent days, where hardline Islam is an increasing part of the political scene and played a role in overthrowing the democratically elected government. Close quotes. Let me repeat a part of that. Here it is. And played a role in overthrowing the democratically elected government. We must be very afraid. And it's at this time when this type of thinking only helps Obama. Yet it comes from the Wall Street Journal. Kind of strange. From the proponents of the erosion of civil liberties argument, let me give you something out of the Wall Street Journal's lead editorial on December 29th, 2011. So this is from the editorial writers of the Wall Street Journal. Quotes, my, look what Congress gave President Obama for Christmas. The 2012 Pentagon budget authorization includes anti-terrorism provisions that confirm and politically endorse the real-world practices of two administrations. This is the upshot of the detention language in the defense policy bill that Mr. Obama signed this month and has received too little media attention. Congress has confirmed the power claimed by both the Bush and Obama administrations to detain and question members of Al-Qaeda or associated groups whenever or wherever and for however long the executive deems proper. Now notice how they didn't say anybody who's dangerous or belligerent. Enemy combatants will get their day in court, but won't be treated as common criminals who can invoke Miranda rights. This is a convoluted editorial, by the way. Back to it. Congress also accepted the Obama administration's expansive definition of associated terror groups, which the White House has used to legally justify ramped-up drone strikes on terrorists in Pakistan, Yemen, and elsewhere, who aren't necessarily card-carrying members of Al-Qaeda. Card-carrying members is a reference to the ACLU when you say card-carrying, or card-carrying communists, certainly. Whatever happened to all those cries about the imperial presidency, close quotes. Yes, indeed. What happened to those cries? The Wall Street Journal editorial board means, what happened to those cries from Democrats? Because there are certainly doom and gloom predictions from Republicans about Obama and Obama's imperial presidency. This is why who the president is matters, as painful as that is. The president appoints Supreme Court justices. I'm not saying this is for the reason you think to complain about Obama. I'm still complaining about the George W. Bush presidency and the appointment of the idiots Roberts and Alito, who together with Scalia, Thomas, and Kennedy allowed the Bush administration to force through the Patriot Act and its progeny, including this worse than more of the same bill that was signed by Obama, allowing for the annulment of the 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendments to the Constitution. Let me go through each one. I'll be right back. Hang on. Hang on. Hang on. Sorry about that. Never leave silence, as they say. Or as I can say about Rick Perry, oops, oops. Let me read the 4th Amendment to you. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants, it's capitalized, W, shall issue, but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. It's not an oath or an affirmation. And it's not going to be on probable cause, which is a defined term. And let's talk about how that Patriot Act got through. It got through because Democrats couldn't look weak in the next election. They knew they would lose. That's how it got through without being read. Painful, because they had to get reelected. And now it's there. And now that it's there, it's there. And now the Supreme Court has said that most parts of it are constitutional. It's still there. Only way to overturn it's a constitutional amendment, which I'm not calling for right now. This goes along with the unreasonable searches, sneak and peeks. You can see in the 4th Amendment what it says. Warrants shall issue. This just says that the president can determine that somebody is belligerent and dangerous and should be detained and shipped to Egypt or shipped to Saudi Arabia and tortured. Doesn't say that word. You've read about the new Google privacy policy. Well, that's a private-public company. They absolutely cooperate with the NSA, DEA, Defense Department. Let me give you the example. I was flying to Costa Rica. Here's a painful thing that you don't know about. I was flying to Costa Rica. My flight was delayed. I was going to miss my connection. So I flew up to Dallas and got on an American Airlines flight and got to Costa Rica. On the way back, I wanted to change my password with Google. They asked me a security question. And the security question was, what airline flew you for free to Costa Rica? The only possible way they could know that is by reading my emails. I couldn't believe it. I actually gave them an incorrect answer at the beginning. I said the original airline. And they said, no, that's not right. It really was right because they were the ones that paid the new airline. But I just wanted to get into Google and get my emails. That's amazing. People said I shouldn't be surprised. I've been saying it all along. They're cooperating, reading everything, looking at everything, listening to every phone call, every Skype, every text. They just would never been so out with it. They're out with it. People say that's what I signed when I signed okay to the privacy policy. Could be. Did I read it? No. I need a Google account. I need a company that's going to stick around. I don't like changing my email. Does everybody, 200 million around the world, Google users, know that they've agreed to have every email read? And since they cooperate with NSA, DEA, etc., Defense Department, CIA, FBI, that means that stuff's being passed right along. It's not paranoia when it's real. And this idea of indefinite detentions and assassinations of American citizens. Now that's happened all along. They just haven't been so out with it. It's the quote I gave you from the Michael Ventura article. It's in the twilight. This stuff is happening. It is a slippery slope. Let's go to the Fifth Amendment. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia, when in actual service in time of war or public danger. In a time of war. This is an unlimited war. Hostilities will always be going on, forever. That is the movie 1984. The War on Terror, started by Bush. It was actually started by Clinton. It was actually started by George Big Bush. Notice how war is capitalized. Maybe because this exception to the rule requires there to be a capital W, war. There has never been a declaration of war against anybody who hates the United States. There will never be an end to this war on terror. And since it's Obama doing it, our guy's doing it. It's okay. What do you have to fear? Maybe when the Founding Fathers wrote Section 8 of Article 1 of the Constitution setting forth the powers of Congress to declare war and make rules concerning captures on land and water, they meant this specific law. We've always been at war. We will always be at war. If somebody says that's the reason that we can do this is a new kind of war, then declare war. Stand up and look like the idiot that you will look like, that we declare war on any individual who says they do not like the United States and would like to fight against it. Do it. Get up there on C-SPAN and do it. Cowards. And that's also because they have to get reelected, which we'll get off on. I mean, how dare they have relinquished their right to declare war? Can't. It's unconstitutional. Congress has the right to declare war. They didn't want the king to declare war. That's from Michael Ventura. And I agree with it. This has led to all of these undeclared wars that we've had, that we have. Pakistan, Afghanistan, Yemen. Everywhere where we have troops, we have an undeclared war. And everywhere where we have drones, don't even think that that's not war. When you're killing people, it's war. That's a pretty simple definition. And that's what we're doing. Let's read the Sixth Amendment. What does that say? In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with the witnesses against him, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. Indefinite detention is what it says, of dangerous people, can be shipped to Saudi Arabia. Doesn't say this part, where they will then be tortured. Indefinite detention by definition means a direct contradiction to the rights contained in this Sixth Amendment. And the big boys hang their hats on in all criminal prosecutions. They claim that these terrorists are not criminals, even though they may be U.S. citizens. Strain the language. This is exactly what the founders had in mind. When colonists were indefinitely detained, they were probably called terrorists or some term like it in England at the time to justify the suspension of rights granted to citizens of the realm. It is the very reason why the founders were concerned with this type of power being indiscriminately used. This is specifically what the founders did not want to have happen. Indefinite detention deemed by the president to be dangerous. That is the point of writing this amendment. I've said the president matters. The president does matter. And I'm going to continue to say that this president is bullshit. This is a bullshit. Anti-civil liberties. Worse than more of the same. It's painful. Because we can't risk Supreme Court justices on a Republican president. But we have to deal with this. I have to deal with Obama signing something like this. Because he has to get reelected. I guess. I don't think. This one's a strange one. This one is strange. Because it's going to infuriate some Republican base. So it doesn't seem to make any sense. All right. There was a story on MSNBC on January 22nd, 2012 regarding the descent of Iraq into a police state. I've got the link here. I want you to listen to this article and relate it to the things that are and have happened in the U.S. Iraq becoming police state, warns rights group. Country slipping back into authoritarianism despite collapse of autocratic regimes elsewhere in region, says Human Rights Watch. All right, this is January 22nd, 2012, in Baghdad. Iraq's Shiite-led government cracked down harshly on dissent during the past year of Arab Spring uprisings, turning the country into a budding police state as autocratic regimes crumbled elsewhere in the region, an international rights group said Sunday. Security forces abused protesters, harassed journalists, tortured detainees, and intimidate activists, Human Rights Watch said in the Iraq chapter of its annual report. Iraq is quickly slipping back into authoritarianism, said Sarah Lee Whitson, Middle East director for the New York-based group. despite U.S. government assurances that it helped create a stable democracy in Iraq. The reality is that it left behind a budding police state, she said. We like police states, by the way. Protests against Iraq's U.S.-backed and democratically elected government erupted around the country in February 2011, alongside other demonstrations in the Arab world. While protests in other countries demanded the downfall of autocratic regimes, most of the demonstrations in Iraq pushed for improved services like reliable electricity and water and an end to corruption. It's Occupy, by the way. The government clamped down, sometimes sparking bloody clashes, as when 14 were killed in confrontations between security forces and civilians across the country during the February 25th protests, billed as the Day of Rage. A year later, with U.S. troops withdrawn and Iraq's government mired in a political crisis, the protest movement has all but died out. Occupy. Demonstrators who gather in Baghdad's central Tahrir Square are usually outnumbered by the security forces watching over them. Occupy. Iraqis are quickly losing ground on the most basic of rights, including the right to free speech and assembly, said Samir Maskati, an Iraq researcher for the group. Nowadays, every time someone attends a peaceful protest, they put themselves at risk of attack and abuse by security forces or their proxies, he said. Occupy. Prison brutality, including torture in detention facilities, was a major problem throughout the year, the group's annual report said. In February 2011, Human Rights Watch uncovered a secret detention center controlled by elite forces who report to the Prime Minister's military office. Is this in the U.S.? The group claimed authorities transferred more than 280 detainees to the facility since the beginning of 2010 and charged detainees were tortured there with impunity. Isn't that what Obama just signed? Government officials denied the facility's existence and alleged abuses. I bet that's what we hear. 2 policemen and 2 gunmen were killed, and a member of the government-backed Sunni Sawa militia was wounded in a clash at a security checkpoint in a village near Bakuba, 40 miles northeast of Baghdad, police told Reuters on Sunday. All right. From Wikipedia, because I want to go look at what their constitution said. It was partially written by United States law firms. Their Constitution provides in general rights and freedoms. The Constitution defines many rights and freedoms and incorporates laws in many subject areas into the Constitution. This is their new Constitution. And I'm trying to point out the importance of actually living by the Constitution and knowing what it says. So when Michelle Bachmann actually carries one around and reads it, that's something good that she does. As long as she reads the part about a slave was 3/5 of a person. It's okay to show our bad parts of our history. All right. It guarantees the rule of law, equality before the law, equal opportunity, privacy, inalienable nationality, and dual nationality, judicial independence, the prohibition on criminal ex post facto laws. By the way, those are ones that they make a law about something you did prior to the law's enactment and you become what you did was illegal. Right to counsel, public trial unless the court decides to make it a secret trial. That was written by U.S. law firms. Presumption of innocence, the right to participate in public affairs and the right to vote, to elect, and to nominate. Freedom from extradition, political asylum, economic, social, and cultural liberties, the right to work, the right to join trade unions, ownership of personal property, eminent domain powers, rights similar to the 4 freedoms, European Union, minimum wage, universal health care, free education, dignity, freedom from psychological and physical torture and inhumane treatment, and the right to compensation, freedom from compulsory service, limited freedom of expression, freedom of the press, and freedom of assembly, the right to engage in sports, limited freedom of forming and of joining associations and political parties, requirement of warrants for wiretaps, freedom of religion, freedom of thought, conscience, and belief. Wow, they have a whole bunch more stuff that we don't even have in our Constitution. And we can't even hold on to the very basic things that are the most important things. Keeping cameras out of our living room. Except this, I have voluntarily allowed this to go to the NSA. I'm saying we need constitutional amendments. There's nothing wrong with that. I am going against the status quo. There's nothing wrong with that or illegal with that. I'm actually shooting myself in the foot because I'll make more money if we just kept the status quo. All right. Let's talk about Iran a little bit. War drums beating, 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 beating. It's an election year. Remember, this is related to elections only. Not only, and money for a Defense Department. There was a story in the New York Times dated January 12, 2012 that adversaries of Iran believed to be Israel are using a campaign of explosions, murder of scientists, and cyber attacks to halt Iran's nuclear ambitions. Are these not acts of war? That's what I've said. If you kill anyone, you've committed an act of war. Just declare war, which will obviously be done if the Strait of Hormuz is blockaded by Iran. Well, actually, there will be an unconstitutional authorization by Congress for the president to do whatever is necessary to protect American interests. That's what he's got now, by the way. Don't tell me that Israel is acting without our knowledge and assistance, by the way. Do not say that. Don't tell me that these skirmishes with Iran, including the false flag potential, are not a part of an undeclared war. Today on Fox, Jamie Colby introduced the former ambassador to the UN of Israel, so it was a former Israeli ambassador, by saying that some analysts say that Iran is racing to acquire a nuclear weapon. The ambassador then reiterated and used that phrase. Okay? So he used the introductory phrase that she used to introduce him, that Iran is racing to acquire nuclear weapons. Do you see how very, very simply propaganda is dispersed by Fox and other news outlets? Fox is not the only culprit, but they're the ones that I like to watch because they're very consistent on message. But that was really interesting. She said, I've heard that Iran is racing. And then he said, Iran is racing to acquire nuclear weapons. These guys are great. How many people now are going to say today that Iran is racing towards acquiring nuclear weapons when they're sitting around eating dinner or lunch with their friends? They're going to say it as a fact because she suggested it to the former ambassador who's a master of propaganda. He's supposed to be. Ours is too. John Bolton's good friend. Let's go to one of our failed undeclared wars. I guess succeeded in terms of our corporate imperialism. On January 27, 2012, the Dallas Morning News had a story that talked about Doctors Without Borders abandoning Libya due to torture on pro-Gaddafi supporters, open wounds, stretched position injuries, and deaths. So didn't we go to Libya to get rid of a dictator that was torturing and killing his people? Why are these guys that are there now okay? I'm just asking people that support the Libyan incursion and that supported it. Remember the girl that walked up to me down in Costa Rica? My buddy brought her up and said, hey, she likes politics. I talked about her. She was a classic Obama supporter. I said, so you're okay with killing Libyan babies? It was when we had first started. She's like, well, what? I go, you're okay with killing Libyan babies? No, that's not what we're doing. I would ask this question. When was the last time she read in depth about Libya and what's going on there now and saying we shouldn't have gone because we're killing babies and now people are being tortured and we're probably shipping U.S. citizens over there under this act to be tortured or countries like it. We like cleaner hands. That's what it's called, clean hands. Let's talk about the drug war a little bit. I was recently up in the New York area and we went to a bar, restaurant, to see some old friends and family. They were almost all on some kind of pills. Ritalin, Adderall, Paxil, Valium, Oxy. They were my peers, age-wise. And they all thought it was okay. And you know what? They were all crazy. They were all freaking crazy. Does that mean I'm not crazy? No. But I can tell you this, those pills are supposed to make you interact better. I don't know what they're trying to do. Make you less depressed? make you not cry in public, make you not lean too far forward and speak European distance, and jump around from thought to thought, which I do. I'm amazed. And they don't mind telling anybody that they're on these pills, or that their sons are on these pills and daughters are on these pills. Do you watch Fox News? I mean, I watch Fox. You know what every other commercial is? Have you been injured by Paxil? Have you been injured by Zoloft? Have you been injured by Chantix? Do you have a cleft palate? Did your head fall off during birth? All right, there was a story in the Wall Street Journal dated January 14th, 2012 by John Lyons called Cocaine, the New Front Lines. Let me relate a couple of telling quotes. In the dusty town of Villa Tunari in Bolivia's tropical coca growing region, farmers used to barricade their roads against U.S.-backed drug police sent to prevent their leafy crop from becoming cocaine. These days, the police are gone. The coca is plentiful and locals close off roads for multi-day block parties, not rumbles with law enforcement. Today we don't have these conflicts, not one death, not one wounded, not one jailed, said Leonilda Zurita, a longtime coca grower leader who is now a Bolivian senator, a day after a 13-piece Latin band wrapped up a boozy festival in town. The cause for a celebration is a fundamental shift in the cocaine trade that is complicating U.S. efforts to fight it. Once concentrated in Colombia, a close U.S. ally in combating drugs, the cocaine business is migrating to nations such as Peru, Venezuela, Ecuador, and Bolivia, where populist leaders are either ambivalent about cooperating with U.S. anti-drug efforts or openly hostile to them. The trend underscores the ability of drug cartels to search out friendlier operating environments amid changes in Latin American politics. Adam Smith's invisible hand. I spoke of it this morning with a good friend. They grow the coca where there is no DEA. So the DEA needs to be everywhere? Is that the answer? That's a Socratic method question. Back to the article. Today, Plan Colombia, which is the anti-narcotic war plan by U.S. and Colombian military forces, is pushing coca cultivation back to Peru and Bolivia, a round-trip journey that analysts say illustrates the difficulties of drug interdiction. Quotes, you have the balloon effect for shifting coca production, what I call the cockroach effect for how the cartels jump from one region to the next. And then there's the whole whack-a-mole policy to try to deal with all of it, says Bruce Bagley, a political scientist at the University of Miami and expert on the global drug trade. Close quotes. So we know that doesn't work. Follow the money. Who makes money when we send contractors down there? Who makes money when we send actual CIA employees down there? Who makes money when we send arms down there? Who makes money when we intercept the communications from and to there? And anybody who's related to that little string and spider web of communications. Who makes money? Well, who makes the most money? Seems like Paxil and Valium, Vicodin. Seems that's where the bulk of the money is. So, is there any question that drug companies give money to continue the drug war? Why does weed remain a controlled substance? And my buddy Scooter, sorry about calling it weed, but how could it possibly remain a controlled substance? How can that be? Even listening to O'Reilly, I mean, he struggles to say why it's illegal. It's a gateway drug. We've talked about it before. It's a cul-de-sac drug. We know that the real drug war, at the top of the drug war, the money, is Paxil versus weed. They want me on Paxil. They want me on Vicodin, Zoloft, whatever. They want me on whatever I want to be on that's covered by my copay. They don't get any money on weed. How many weed rehabs have you heard of? Zero. Notwithstanding the incredible propaganda that you will see on TV now. Drugs Inc., marijuana industry, this idea that terrorists are setting booby traps, Mexican terrorists, gang terrorists. That's a big bunch of bullshit. That's the big drug war. But certainly the contractors that go down there, our own agencies that need to justify their budgets in this time of budget cutting, anywhere where they can send CIA employees they want to. Of course. It's the incentive. I don't fault them the incentive. I fault the system that does that. I fault the system that allows senators, congressmen, presidents, politicians to have these side super PACs donating huge amounts of money into issue ads, which are legal under Citizens United. So, because we can't interfere with their free speech right. That's what the drug war is. Also, the stupidity of the population just taking these things. Just turn on Fox, leave it for 8 hours, and your drug that you take will be up there in a lawsuit. Have you taken this? Then call this law firm. Okay, we're going to put all this together again. I've been ranting continuously about the Citizens United Supreme Court case and how it is the major problem causing 60% of the economic problems of this country. Crony capitalism, pay to play, whatever you want to call it, large groups, corporations and unions included, and wealthy donors have disproportionate influence on everything from tax policy to government privatizations. Well, here's a specific example of what a wealthy donor can do. And I want you to ask yourself this question as I read this thing. Is it healthy for democracy that this donor gets specific legislation in return for this donation? Is it healthy for democracy that this donor gets specific legislation in return for this donation? And don't tell me that there's no quid pro quo. Somebody does something nice for you, you do something nice for them. Or they won't do something nice for you again. So yeah, you're not going to say, I need this legislation. Send me this 10 million and I'll get you the legislation. You won't get those smoking guns. Duh! All right, here it is. This is from, believe it's the New York Times. A big check and Gingrich gets a big lift by Nicholas Confessori and Eric Lipton, published January 9th, 2012. For weeks this winter, as Newt Gingrich's presidential hopes faltered under the weight of millions of dollars in attack ads paid for by backers, so this is back January 9th, of Mitt Romney, a small group of Gingrich supporters quietly lobbied for help from one of the richest men in America, Sheldon Adelson, a billionaire casino owner and Mr. Gingrich's longtime friend and patron. And it went through their history, etc. But on Friday, the cavalry arrived. They were just talking about how Gingrich was dying. $5 million check from Mr. Adelson to Winning Our Future, a super PAC that supports Mr. Gingrich. By Monday morning, the group had reserved more than $3.4 million in advertising time in South Carolina, a huge sum in a state where the airwaves come cheap, and the primary is 11 days away. The group is planning to air portions of a movie critical of Mr. Romney's time at Bain Capital, the private equity firm he helped found. The last-minute injection underscores how the 2010 landmark Supreme Court ruling on campaign finance has made it possible for a wealthy individual to influence an election. Mr. Adelson's contribution to the super PAC is 1,000 times the $5,000 he could legally give directly to Mr. Gingrich's campaign this year. At a stop in New Hampshire on Monday, Mr. Gingrich, who complained bitterly about the wealthy Romney supporters who helped send him to a fourth-place finish in Iowa, said Mr. Adelson was operating on his own. If he wants to counterbalance Romney's millionaires, Mr. Gingrich said, I have no objection to him counterbalancing Romney's millionaires. The relationship between Mr. Gingrich and Mr. Adelson dates to the mid-1990s and first centered on their common animosity for labor unions. Mr. Adelson was building his newest resort casino, the Venetian, and became embroiled in a battle with the local culinary union trying to organize his employees. The conflict soured further when Mr. Adelson helped finance a campaign in Nevada to pass legislation curtailing the ability of labor unions to automatically deduct money from members to finance political activities. Mr. Gingrich endorsed the Nevada legislation. He also backed other legislation in 1998 to preserve tax deductions beneficial to the industry. I was watching Huckabee on Fox on January 29th, 2012. And he had an audience to which he was posing questions. It's like 5 rows of 5 people. One of the questions was, do you want to limit the effect of super PACs in campaigns? It was nearly unanimous that they wanted to stop the super PACs. Isn't that interesting how they just kind of unwittingly played into the Citizens United debacle? I mean, the dangerous thing about that for the purpose of Huckabee, being a Republican that he is that they will definitely be harmed more if there was a constitutional amendment overturning Citizens United, Republicans. There's definitely more money that comes in from corporations to the Republican side. But what's amazing is his ability to get people to unanimously raise their hands on TV on Huckabee. We'll keep going here, and I'll get to the point. Let's look at an editorial from the New York Times dated February 10th, 2012. Some saner voices on super PACs. The 112th Congress rode to office in 2010 on the biggest wave of unlimited, undisclosed corporate money that American politics has ever seen. And remember, that was a Republican landslide. That same Congress has hit a historically low approval rating of 10%, Gallup reported this week. It's not a coincidence. Members of Congress know who spent $300 million on their elections, and they are beholden to those outside interests far more than they are to the needs of voters in the country. My God, they sound just like me! Republicans in particular have resisted all legislative efforts to make those donations public. That's why a small news item out of Montana this week was so promising. Senator John Tester, a Montana Democrat in a tough re-election fight, has proposed a pact with his Republican challenger to keep super PACs and other third-party spending out of their race. The proposal suggests that the notion of a truce, like one signed last month by Elizabeth Warren and Scott Brown in the Massachusetts Senate race, might spread to other states. Mr. Tester's opponent, Representative Denny Rehberg, says he is considering the offer. Here's hoping he agrees and that other congressional candidates around the country do the same. At the presidential level, super PACs have allowed the candidates to outsource their attack ads to groups able to accept unlimited contributions from corporations, unions, and wealthy individuals. The gusher of big money freed up by Citizens United and other court decisions will have the same corruptive effect on congressional races if the candidates don't stop it. Once one side arms itself, the other side feels obliged to match. This destructive effect was made sadly evident this week when President Obama, who had previously denounced outside spending, abandoned that principle and began inviting unlimited donations to the super PAC supporting him. And all right, and if you keep thinking of incentives and disincentives, because that's what humans operate by. So what we're trying to do here is ask the right question. We're trying to come up with the actual problem. So we're looking at all of these things that are going on so that we can ask the right question. An article in the Wall Street Journal dated February 1st, 2012 has a telling headline. Outside groups spend more on ads than candidates do. It was written by Brody Mullins. I think the headline says it all. Is this what the founders meant by free speech? Do you think it's what the founders meant by free speech, freedom of speech? Groups putting together money beyond campaign limits and doing issue ads, which are clearly, if you're against the Obamacare, or whatever that is, the National Health Act, or whatever the heck that thing was, you're against Obama. That's how simple that is. All right. Keep thinking of that. Incentive and disincentive. The Wall Street Journal, January 23rd, 2012, had an op-ed by Bradley Smith called The War on Political Free Speech. This is a pro-corporations or people op-ed. He does an excellent job of deflection, talking about all the political rights that corporations have always had. And when I say deflect, It's like the way I've heard you beat a lie detector. Always focus on the true part of what you are saying. And deflecting. I will argue that this is one of those times where the history does not matter. Because he talks about the history of Citizens United. That the point of this rant, sometimes the ability to come up with a solution, can be found outside of the channel of history. The key is identify the actual problem, asking the right question, and dealing with the devil is in the details. Then and only then can you come up with a possible solution to anything. If you do not ask the right question, you cannot possibly come up with the correct solution. Let me give you some telling quotes from the Bradley Smith op-ed. In talking about the people that want a constitutional amendment to keep corporations from spending in political campaigns, Smith talks about the, quotes, misinformation put out by the proponents of the amendment, the constitutional amendment overturning Citizens United. Quotes, the goal of this misinformation is clear. Reformers who sit mainly on the political left and their Democratic Party allies hope to silence voices that they perceive to be hostile to their political interests. 2 years after Citizens United, American democracy seems as robust as ever. This may be what its critics fear most, a vibrant debate that they cannot control and fear they will lose. Okay, he says, 2 years after Citizens United, American democracy seems as robust as ever. Will the blustery political speak by rich people and rich companies and rich advocacy groups and rich unions appear to be robust? How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. So, he's brought up some devil is in the details problems. Corporations need to be considered a person to be able to sue someone. I'm not trying to override that. I'm trying to override that any group, my constitutional amendment goes beyond the Bernie Sanders. Goes way beyond the Bernie Sanders. He wants to just do for-profit corporations. I want any group of more than one human being or any entity to not be allowed to donate in kind or cash to a political campaign or an issue. That's right. We'll eliminate all these billboards and all these commercials. Follow the money. Who's going to not like that? Media companies. I mean, we can look at this another way. Because the election is basically about when your people are in office, you get what you want. So going back very quickly to the commons, the ability to drill in the Gulf of Mexico. Corporations that can spend as much as they want to get their politicians elected will get the oil leases. That's just how it works. Incentives and disincentives. That's how everybody works. Every entity and every profit-making entity, every human. So you can't have any entity that is not a human being donating more than $100. Excuse me. You can't have them donating anything. Any human being can only donate $100, including donations from yourself. No revolving door. So if you're in the EPA writing oil leases, or Minerals and Management Service, the guys that write the leases for the Gulf of Mexico, can't go to work for Exxon afterwards. Sorry. Don't go to work for the government thinking that all of a sudden you're going to get a huge job when you get out from the people that you regulate and you give them favors, obviously. How can that not be the case? Sure, there might be some good people that try not to do that, but look at the incentive that's there. Why would we not eliminate the incentive? Eliminate it. And as to term limits for Congress, my God, these guys can never be running for re-election. Give the reps 4 years and the senators 1 6-year term. One term. Maybe the president a single 6-year term as well. Because everything right now is election. I watched The Body of War on the documentary channel. It was painful. It's about a guy who was paralyzed within the first 5 days of going to Iraq. And it talks about the resolution that allowed us to go to Iraq. and basically the run-up to Iraq. After seeing it, I have a question. How many senators would have approved the unconstitutional Iraq War Powers Resolution in 2002 if they had not been running for re-election? It was the resolution where Congress, and I say unconstitutionally, relinquished its right to declare war on Iraq to Bush the Younger. This is the last part of the constitutional amendment, and maybe the most important. If senators and reps are not running for re-election because of incentives and disincentives, they are less likely to pick up the phone when Exxon calls than when I call. Now, other people have talked about having skin in the game, whatever. If you're not doing it for political purposes to go to war, or for you're going to get a job at Halliburton when you come back from being the vice president, because Halliburton continues to have interest in Iraq, at least eliminate the incentive. That will create a class of citizen politicians. People who have to raise individual $100, who know they're not going to go back to work for a regulated industry, and maybe they'll do the right thing. Now, I can't guarantee they're going to do the right thing, but if we can eliminate the incentives and disincentives that keep them from doing the right thing, and specifically make them do the wrong thing, and watch that, The Body of War, on the documentary channel. Look it up. Get it at Netflix. It is painful. Wow. I mean, it is painful. Painful, painful, painful. All right, let me talk a little bit about what I call fluff up with the Catholic Church. My buddy M called me this morning, and we talked a bit about it. Appreciate the call, by the way. On Fox, you're hearing, how dare the government override a church principle, moral principle? Well, what about Sharia law for Muslims? What about polygamy? What about female circumcision? What about working on the Sabbath? What about thou shalt not kill as to capital punishment? What about Coptics wanting to smoke weed? What about Christian Scientists? Now, I have to ask, I mean, you see all these things, and this idea of that there's not a separation of church and state. You're seeing some of the same religious actors saying that when they normally want to bring more religion into the state. They want to be able to have the 10 Commandments in the courthouse. It's interesting. All political. All based on money. They don't like Obamacare. That's what it's all about. There's not a moral argument here. No good Catholic needs to worry about what the church is forced to tell its insurance carrier that it needs to carry as a part of our universal health care plan. Let's call it that, because that's what it is. It's turning into a universal health care plan. If you're a good Catholic, just don't take the contraceptives. What are you worried about? It's against your morals? That's BS. This is all political. So what you're seeing is pure politics and money. Pure. Contraceptive coverage? Are you saying a Catholic school can't? I mean, I guess you're the Catholic Church, and you're saying, I have a school that teaches school children, and I have teachers that want the pill. And it's not covered? No, it's covered. Don't act like there's a separation of church and state and you can go do whatever you want because it's one of your guiding principles. You can make up new guiding principles. Just individuals wrote those. Of course it's ridiculous. Do you sell books on Sunday? Do you collect money on the Sabbath? Do Christian Scientists take aspirin? It's a big red herring. And by the way, I'm tired of hearing how churches are persecuted. You get free, no property taxes on gigantic pieces of property. So shut up. I don't get anything for free. 95% of Americans believe in some higher authority. You fear a few agnostics, atheists, saying keep the 10 Commandments out of courthouses? Ridiculous. That's all there is today. I want to thank our sponsors, all of which support this form of conversation, but not necessarily the content of this conversation. PianoByAngelo.com, Angelo Limbesi's, teaches and plays keyboards all over Austin. ZetaDesign.com for all of your decorative painting needs. She can make anything look like anything. AustinAreaPlumbing.com for all of your Austin plumbing problems. www.ticoadventurelodge.com, a small hotel in Samara, Costa Rica. CNC Surf School in Samara, Costa Rica at cncsurfsamara.webs.com. Avella Latina, great sunset bar and restaurant in Samara, really the only one. Ambar Tequila at www.santospirits.com, an extremely smooth tequila. Another cool 4-unit green hotel in Samara called The Logan. And they also have the Villa Blanca at www.thelogansamara.com. And of course, the Delicate Genius in Houston, who is a platinum sponsor. Thanks for coming out.